I think we reached a stage now where we have very nice results. I mean, we know that we have a lot of interesting data. There is a group also of people, not only the scientists, but the Tara expedition group. And the issue a little bit now is we're all tired. So we finished, you know, doing all this work very, very quickly. So I think it's time now to think a little bit about what we are going to do with the samples and data we have, but also what should we do? Should we remain a small group, or should we try to increase the size of Tara Oceans? Should we change the funding model? There are lots of questions like this. So, well, obviously, we still have a lot of samples to sequence. So the group we have now can finish the sequencing organization of the data, publish still probably a series of very interesting papers. But as we heard, there are a lot of questions that will come up in the coming years about the oceans, not only for science but for society. So yeah, so the question is so maybe I will ask each of you to say your feeling a little bit about what we should do with what you think, how Tara Oceans could be used, in the coming years for the international community. So if you have some ideas about this, we can start like this, and then yeah.
I guess I'm not one for big science by committee.
Yeah, me neither.
And, I also have the adage, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So if things are working pretty well with your current organization, I think there's a strong case to do that. But once your data are released, and they are,
yes,
then you'll have a lot of people that'll be really interested in working with you, and the trick is just how do you best coordinate that so that you're not duplicating efforts.
Yes.
So that you're not having young people start to work on a project and get totally overwhelmed by some big lab somewhere or something like that. Those are a little tricky to deal with, but I think I don't see any reason to fundamentally change the way you've been doing things,
okay,
in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very interesting question, Eric. I mean, in some ways, I don't see how it can't change, because you're going to have pressure from outside. There's going to be so many people interested in this. As I told Eric and Chris, I was just at a meeting last week, and someone put up a slide from the papers, one of the slides, and that was used as background for the rest of his talk, right? So already it's becoming the background for other people to do work. So there's going to be huge amount of interest.
Yes.
I think that one of the, I'm not talking about necessarily how Tara should organize itself, how your community should organize yourself, but I do think that there's real opportunities, and I've spoken to some of you about this, to put some tools that people could use to analyze that data themselves, to build on what you guys have already done. So I was talking to Columban, I don't see Columban right now, about his tree, oh there you are, his phylogenetic trees. Right?
Yes.
Everybody, if you could just continue to build off that, that would be really powerful for the community of researchers out there.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay.
There's just, I'm sure, or the network. Each thing you do gets more powerful as you have more people adding to that data set. So, anyway.
Sure.
We have a cartoon character. I like cartoons. Mr. Magoo. People know Mr. Magoo. He's this guy that would walk off, and suddenly there'd be a step for him, and he'd go up and, a roller coaster and get off, and there was always something where he wouldn't crash to the ground. And Tara reminds me of that, in that you've done these things, you didn't have your funding for the sequencing, and that occurred at the last moment. But I don't think that is a sustainable path.
No.
And so I think that, Global Ocean, the data was quite useful for a very long time. I think Tara, the data that you generated will be quite useful for a long time. I think you'd like to become a sustainable organization. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, you're like a biotech that was out to discover a drug. And so people drank a lot of coffee, and they had a great forward momentum and camaraderie, and they got it. But then they became a pharmaceutical company. It was a very different structure. Mm-hmm. And I think that the impact of Tara could be bigger if it says, okay, how do we restructure ourselves to become sustainable? How do we get sustainable funding rather than living off of, you know, risky grants? And so I think that kind of thing would, because Terra's impact is more than scientific, it's really outreach too.
Yes.
You'd like to fuse the two to be, and so I think you have real potential with this giant splash you have now to try to think about how to become a more sustainable organization.
But yeah, this is also what I think a little, because what you say also, you know, developing more tools and things like this. The problem with this is that it requires money, it requires people, it requires stability.
Yes.
And I think that now we need some kind of thing like this. So we would need to, as you said, I don't think we should grow very much, but there is a need for stabilization and structuration of a small group of people, maybe a bit larger than what we are, but not very much bigger, but a bit more stable to be able to continue at least for a certain time to take advantage of what we did, of the data we did. There are big issues also about, you know, we have been discussing about the science also somehow. I think that, you know, my initial idea was more about evolution actually, because I was interested in evolution. And I think that what we discussed about the tree of life and the position, you know, all these things, is very interesting because in the ocean there are lots of issues like, you know, symbiotic events, parasitism. We saw like there is interaction between organisms is as important, if not more important, than environmental pressure for the structuration of ecosystems. So it would be very interesting to find a way to look at the, you know, the where in evolution big genome changes happened and how this correlates with, for example, symbiotic events or emergence of complexity in general would be very interesting. I think we have a lot of data in our oceans that can be used, just like you said about the, you know, the unknown codons. I mean, the thing like this. But this is true also at the level of the organism interactions. There are lots of things to find out. But again, this requires people and a lot of and money, yeah, and stable money. I think we maybe are all exhausted, so maybe we should have a drink. Christian?
Yeah, actually, while you were talking, there's one thing that came to my mind. You know, in 70s, there were a bunch of very creative people in California who did the whole Earth catalog. And of course, this was the first time, for example, that the image of the Earth was published from the space. Had a huge impact. It was basically a catalog of how to find information. It was, in some ways, a precursor of the internet. After 10 years of very successful enterprise, they decided to disband. But the way they did the disbanding was interesting. They did a big party in San Francisco. They had amassed quite a bit of money from the whole Earth catalog. And for 2 days, people presented projects on what to do with the money to start a new project. And I think we should look into what happened and think if we couldn't do the same.
Yeah, but we should have accumulated money, which we didn't. We have a treasure, yeah. Okay. I think if there is not more... any other ideas? Yeah, Gabi.
We made an expedition. It means once a time. The concept of end-to-end, multidisciplinary concept of end-to-end, needs also the time resolution. Maybe there are two things to do. First, as you said, continue to work on the data. The second is maybe to introduce the concept, the same concept in different regions over time. It means time series of genomics, of end-to-end, of interaction in different conditions of the nature.
Yes. I think this goes along the lines a little bit of what you guys said about the future of the you know, of the oceanography, the need for large-scale time series and observation in the oceans. Yes, yeah, sure. Well, we did not discuss the future of Tara, but this is also the Tara expedition. This is you know, something that should be discussed also in the context of the, but maybe not now. We should. Chris, do you want to say something?
Maybe I'll move to the more philosophical one, which, you know, borders a little bit on what Ginger was talking about how much do we think we will care about the oceans in the future. I mean, the oceans are a great resource, not only the fisheries, but plankton and all kinds of other mineral resources and so on, as you pointed out. And ultimately, we can do a lot of things now, right? Sequencing is cheaper and more sensitive, and, you know, we can really go hard at things. But do you think we will be given the prerogative to do that by our governments and by our society? I mean, how much priority do you think our society will give to the oceans in the future and to exploring them in the way that we've been doing? It's a more philosophical way to maybe continue or end the discussion.
You know, I think that we as a society are becoming more and more aware of the importance of the oceans in regulating how the Earth functions. So, you know, in the US right now, we've had issues with funding and finances, but we will come out of that, right? And I think that what we'll see is that oceanographers and people working in the ocean, well, let me step back. So in that slide I showed in 1986, oceanography was pretty insular, right? There was no need to work with anybody but an oceanographer because, well, we were oceanographers, right? And now I think that we're moving to a place where we can have a cell biologist that becomes really interested in oceanography, right? We can have an atmospheric chemist that's really interested in oceanography, or a public health person, or all sorts of disciplines now recognize the importance of thinking about the oceans. I'll tell you a t-shirt that I always introduce non-oceanographers to oceanography. And there's a t-shirt that undergraduates at our university made, and it says, on one side of the t-shirt, it says, the oceans cover 70% of the planet, and on the other side, it says, majority rules. So there it is. You know, it's the, it's the majority. Right, and so
but also I think that, you know, it's a little bit our duty if we want to get more funding for the protection of the oceans, the study, the supervision of this, you know, of the oceans and things. You know, the cell biologists and molecular biologists, you know, managed to get a lot of money from the governments because they said they are going to cure cancer and things like this, which is partly true because we made a lot of progress in this field. I think we should do the same. That's what we have been doing with Tara, actually, is to try to explain to the people and the politicians that the oceans are very important and we should care about it and we need to know them, so to protect them, actually. So I think this is also our job.
Just to echo what Ginger and Eric said, I think one of the unique things about Tara that was maybe less highlighted in the talks here is, in terms of the way of the organization, is that as scientists, we are used to work just with scientists. And when we go to sea, the scientists are very separate from the crew and from the other, so the scientists are just like a independent unit. And what was unique about Tara was that the crew, all the people that were involved were equal part of the adventure. And I think Tara set a very different model of thinking about doing science and getting the public to think about science So however we change the thinking about the organization, I think we need to keep that in mind. I mean, to at least not to lose that aspect, because that's really was a unique part that would help in the future to make the public aware of.
I just want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for being with us today. I think that we need to, in order to go towards what your beloved ocean that you described, you really need to share. Even genomics, interactomics, whatever omics you talk about, you need to make the effort to always give the people the big picture. Where does the genomics sit in the day life of people? How even the people who fund us, they need to know the big picture. Where in the big picture of the society this sits, and what it will bring to the future, to the mankind, to always bring that to the egology of people. My egology is what I touch every day, what I do. And this is very hard to do with genomics or marine science, but I think what we managed to do with Tara together is to tell this story to the people in a way that they understand the adventure, and then they understand why we take so much risk and what we do that and not that. And I think this is an effort that we need to keep doing to convince other people and to convince the member states of the UN to go towards the beloved and not on the forgotten ocean. Really, education.
You know, I think Ginger's point about these two futures, you know, is a real one. And I think that Tara has sort of an opportunity as well as responsibility to think about how to go forward. And that it could, you know, and I think times have changed. We can't depend on governments to support our research. You know, you have to go to private foundations, private individuals. You know, Tara needs to, you know, and I think you have an unusually attractive something to sell. And, you know, we have muscular dystrophy data that supports funding. We'd like Tara to make something like that supports ocean awareness. And,
yes, true.
And so these are opportunities that you have that could send things, getting the public progressively engaged. And it's an incredibly difficult task, but you are in position. And so in addition to asking fundamental science questions, figuring out how to
communicate
is really important.
Yeah. You may or may not be aware of Ocean Sampling Day. I don't know if you folks even know about that. They just released a huge amount of metagenomic data, not very different from the time you did. And they also have citizen scientists, and they even have little kids collecting samples for them. And they get terribly excited when they get their metagenomes back. And that is something you might consider also would be, you know, having a, yeah, exactly. So I think there's a hunger for people to become part of science, and you can help be part of that and get support from private foundations as well as others, because they're also very interested in that.
So Eric, I mean, you spent like 40 years of your life, you know, modeling cells, and you did all the steps from from discovering the enzyme that makes a cell divide, and then the stochastic modeling of understanding the cell systems biology. So what's your feeling about where we are at in ocean science? Because it seems to me a lot of what we do is still very descriptive, right? And like we said, I mean, the rates and so what in the field of cell biology, what was the decisive steps that really?
You mean in cell biology?
Yeah.
Oh, well, the decisive step is all the work done by other people on measuring rates. You know, doing models in cell biology. We used, you know, we use stochastic models, but when you use stochastic models, you need to put in agents or enzyme molecules which have parameters associated to them. But these parameters have been measured in the cells by, you know, biochemists and biophysicists. So it's a chance, because in the ocean, I don't know how many of these rates are known. You just said that there are not enough rates known. we need to know much more rates. That's not easy to get because, you know, for cells, you can have the cells in the lab, so break down the cells, isolate the enzymes, measure the rates, do things like this. But in the ocean, I mean, we don't know how to measure these rates right now, do we?
Some yes, some no.
Yeah. It's hard because it's not only enzymes rates, but it's also organisms turnover rates, like, you know, how they eat each other, how they die, how they, you know, all that stuff we don't really know, do we? It's hard to know. Oh, sorry.
I'm saying many of those rates, some things are pretty reliable, certain kinds of rates, and other ones are somewhat speculative or approximate, but they are not measured very often. They were measured a lot, probably more in cruises in the 80s and 90s than they are today. Just because that was before everyone spent all their time collecting DNA. That was what they could do. So they spent their time and effort at sea measuring rates and biomasses and carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, that sort of thing. And there's also the biogeochemical processes, so the nitrogen cycle, the redox cycle, the sulfur cycle. All those things are actually, there are people that spend their entire effort at sea measuring those rates, but they are now a small fraction of the field because of the focus on the molecular work.
Well, that's a mistake, because I know that the same thing happens in biology, in cell biology. You know, everybody is doing genomics now, and they forget, even in EMBL, and the department I was in, there are not very few biochemists left. You know, I left, and biochemists, there are almost no biochemists. And I think this is a big mistake, because we need these things. We need these numbers. And you know, to answer your question, I do think that modeling will work very well in the future for the oceans, because like Mick Follows, for example, his models are beautiful, and with all the data that are being accumulated now, we can do interesting. The interesting thing also, I think, my intuition is that the combining, you know, bioinformatics analysis, which allows you to look at interactions between organisms and things like this, with these stochastic models in the oceans, would be very interesting. But I don't know, you know, this is kind of in the future too, but not so far away. I think it's not so far. Yeah. We should work on this in the TARA group here. Okay. Maybe I leave the mic to Anna. So we have Anna Fuchs, who is the head of CNRS, who is going to say
a few words. Thank you. Thank you, Eric. I'm glad to be here tonight. I'm sorry I missed the conferences. I wanted to attend at least some of them, but that wasn't possible because of my schedule. So, but I promise I'll read the science papers. So I remember when I got this position at CNRS, this was probably 2010, when Françoise told me something like, you should come with me, you know, meet some people, you'll be interested. So we came there, and I met Eric and Romain and a certain number of guys over there. And then the story they were telling me was absolutely fantastic. I mean, I really became a great fan of TARA Ocean, I must say. So from Eric's dream to the science papers, I mean, wow, what an adventure. Fantastic, really. And CNRS, I must say, is absolutely proud of having participated to this adventure. A very risky project. We like risky projects. We like risky projects even when they fail, and we, of course, love risky projects when they succeed. So, what should I say? I like the way Romain, you talked about the fact that TARA Ocean is science and is telling a story about science, that saying to everyone that science is still an adventure. I mean, a human adventure, scientific adventure, and that's very important. I mean, it's really fantastic. What is truly amazing is that we now have these You know, we are celebrating these papers in science. It's a milestone, but it's not at all the end of the story. I mean, it's perhaps the beginning of the story. It opens up something, I mean, that's truly extraordinary. I mean, at least for us, I mean, CNRS, it's really amazing. I mean, this is simply, the story is like, you know, pushing back the frontiers of science, pushing back the frontiers of life. So, well, what is your next dream, Eric? Tell us about it. Tell us about that. Tell us about it, and we'll do our best to put some funds in it. So I don't want to make a long speech. So I'll just drop by to say hello and to say thank you, and congratulations to all of you for this. CNRS will always, I promise, CNRS will always be behind you in the future and for the next steps of this wonderful adventure. You know, here when it all started, I remember that in France, you know, people are always moaning about, you know, is this pure science? What is pure science, by the way? Does anyone knows about pure science? Isn't that a bit commercial or a bit communication or things like that? You know, these are four-letter words in French. C-O-M-M, it's like com. It's a four-letter word. We have commercial and communication. Well, this is not science. It's not pure. Well, the result is absolutely fantastic, you know. So thanks also, many thanks to the sponsors. We shouldn't believe, of course, it's unbelievable, especially, of course, Agnès B, who did such a wonderful work. So congratulations from CNRS to all of you, really, from deep in my heart.